Hello, 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 hello. यहाँ रख लेते हैं। Hello, hello, hello. Is okay? Hello, 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 hello. Is okay?
Good evening to everybody. We are resuming the training program on research methodology and innovative statistical applications with our session, with our fourth session literature review, which will be by which will be taken hello will be taken up by Professor Ahmad Ansari. Professor Valeed Ansari has more than 3 decades teaching and research experience. His research interests include asset pricing, behavioral finance. Hold on a second, everybody. Hello. 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 Good evening, everybody. We are resuming our training program on research methodology and innovative statistical applications with the fourth session that will be on literature review. This session will be taken up by Professor Ahmad Ansari. Professor Ahmad Ansari has more than 3 decades of teaching and research experience. His research interests in asset pricing, corporate governance, and Islamic banking and finance. He has published papers in national journals of reputation such as Vikal and Margin, and international journals like Journal of Asset Management, International Journal of Emerging Markets, Managerial Finance, Applied Finance Letters, Journal of Risk Finance, and International Journal of Finance Markets and Derivatives. We welcome you, sir.
I welcome you all to this session. The task which has been assigned to me is to take you through what is literature review. So what I plan today is that I will briefly discuss about the research process. Then I'll go on to discuss about what is research, and that will lead to the discussion about the literature review, what we look in a literature review. Then I will discuss with you how to critically analyze literature, and then I will also briefly discuss about a concept which has recently come up, systematic review of literature. And then I will discuss with you something about how to write literature review. And lastly, I will briefly discuss the referencing part. So this is what I plan. Let us see how far I am able to cover up all these topics. So let's get going. and start with the process. You can see on your screen that the research process consists of, first thing is that if you wish to do research, you formulate and clarify your research topic based on a very preliminary, that is the basic. The starting point is that you may conduct some study some papers, and on the basis of that you arrive at that this is the topic on which you will work. Then after that what you will do, that you will review this literature critically. So I will also tell you what we mean by critical review of literature. Then I will discuss you the research. This will lead to research approach and strategy. I think there is some issue with that. If then I will some issue with. Okay. Then it leads to research approach and strategy. And then another issue is there, that in some cases there are ethical concerns, which I think Professor Bijapur may have taken up, like the consent of the participant, privacy issues and other issues like that. And then when you plan to carry out a research, then you will have how you are going to conduct the sampling, what type of sampling method you will use it, what kind of data, whether primary data or secondary data, or if you are going to use primary data, then you may administer a questionnaire, or it may be semi-structured questionnaire, or you may undertake observation. These are some of the methods which you may undertake to carry out a research. Then after you have collected the data, then you analyze the data using quantitative method, or it may be supplemented by qualitative method. And quantitative method may be some statistical tools like various kind of, like t-test, z-test, regression analysis, and so on and so forth. Or so qualitative method may be case study method or something like that. And then you write your dissertation and prepare your presentation, and finally you submit your dissertation or thesis, whatever you call. This process is also, very much applicable to paper writing itself as well. So this is, I am talking in context of the what we call it the research, because in research writing, paper writing, you also do the same thing. So this is the scheme, and my focus is mostly on here. I will focus here how we conduct the review of literature, because this is the most important part of the research, because everything stems from this, the other activities as well. Now before I go to research, the literature review part, some of the questions. Is it research? Collecting facts or information with no clear purpose? Naturally, it is not a research. In research, you have a clear-cut purpose, what we call aim of the research. Without any purpose, we cannot describe it as research. Recording facts or information about or information without interpretation. You collect the fact but without interpretation. This is also not research. Or one undertake an activity, esoteric activity, which is very unknown activity, or exclusive activity, something like that, or a kind of activity which we can describe a kind armchair theorizing, which is unknown to most of the people. That is also not research. Or sometimes we use some jargons. That is also not research. So what is research? Research is, among other things, an intensive activity that is based on the work of others and generate new ideas to pursue and question to answer. An intensive activity. Intensive activity means that it is not one time activity. Now today you do some literature review and then tomorrow stop. It is a sustained process. Second thing, it is based on the work of others. I will elaborate upon later, and that generates new ideas, and that leads to answer, and answer leads to further question, because no research is conclusive. So that is why if anybody is saying that I have done the most conclusive research, that is not research, because a research leads to further questions. Another definition I have also given, but I am skipping these things because in the interest of time. Now let us take some of this. What research is based on the work of others. You know that anybody who is, for example, I am here taking up this literature review discussion with you. So all these are not mine. Something I have, added here and there, but most of these ideas I have learned from others. So research is based on the work of others. If you recall that Einstein once said that when he was asked about his achievement, he said that I was standing on the shoulders of giants. Who were the giants? Previous researchers, isn't it? So that is why acknowledgement, that we acknowledge that I learned this thing because of the work of others. Then a research is something which can be replicated. For example, if you carry out a research, especially in sciences, it is very common, the same lab, if you have it, then you can, but in social sciences, it may be different. For example, the context may be changed, but in some cases nowadays, what is happening is that data is made available, that anybody who wants to verify whether the results arrived at are correct or not, that can be replicated. Is generalizable to other settings. For example, whatever we find out here, to some at least it can be extended to other settings. Not necessarily that every research. That is why we write it that this is the research. It cannot be extended to other settings. Maybe in USA it may not be applicable. Based on some logical rationale and tied to theory. Some logic and some rationale is there. What is the theory? Theory is actually it tries to describe some type of relationship between variables. For example, if you use online, how much is the learning? What is the relationship? Offline, for example, if you do this thing, what may happen? So some kind of relationship is we try to find out, and and some logic. It is not say witchcraft, something like witchcraft. You try to find out that I believe in, and then you set out. Belief has to be tested, verified, is doable. For example, something you start a very gigantic project, you cannot submit it, it's of no use. You can do it. Some very abstract idea, something like that, which you cannot translate it, this is not research. And research generates new question. As I've already told you, that a person is known by the kind of question one asks, not the answers he gives. If you can ask intelligent questions, you are a good researcher. The research will lead to further questions. That is why we write it, that these are the areas which should be explored further. This is not the end of the story, rather maybe the beginning of the story. Some exciting new researches. And is cyclical in nature. Cyclical means once you do research, then again lead to further, research. Is incremental. It is not that one person comes in and then there is a huge mass of research. It is not like that. Slowly it's built up. It's incremental. And it should be a political activity. If you know that a research is carried out for political purpose, then it means a bias will creep. One of the disadvantages of research is that researcher should be objective. It should not look from a lens, from a particular reference, should be objective. and any research should have relevance for the society. If any research is being carried out which has no relevance, that also begs the question. So that is why I wanted just to keep you, informed about what is the subject matter of research. Now, with this a background, let us try to understand what we try to find out, why we do research. Why we do literature review, why we conduct literature review, why we undertake literature review. So let us go further. This definition I have taken from a very famous book, Doing Literature Review by Chris Hart. He describes a literature review, the selection of available documents, both published and unpublished, on the topic, which can contain information, ideas, data, and evidence. Now you can understand information, ideas, data. Data may be available because your search activity on Google may be available, but it will not be meaningful. But I'm deliberately not using financial market because one of my favorite areas. And evidence written from a particular extent to fulfill certain aim. Every research has certain objectives, and you collect the data to pursue certain aims, certain purpose. And this data has to be investigated and evaluated. So that is why the first thing is that we try to collect whatever information, the data, information available. For example, whenever we talk about literature review, we think that only text is there. Sometimes picture may be there. For example, department architect is provided some pictures of various buildings. They can research it, isn't it? Not necessarily a text is there. Or sometime, face of various people who are here, it can be analyzed that during my lecture, what was their reaction before and after. So, isn't it? So, for that matter, it is not that text is only there and other thing all can also be there. For example, the archaeology department may read the inscriptions, isn't it? May like that. So, I mean, normally we think that like that. Anything, sometime if an idea, one idea can propel research. Somebody may have hinted at, you pick up that idea and you carry forward. Now, when we are conducting literature review, again I am leaving it, because that you will get confused. When we are conducting literature review, then basic question we ask are we get aware about what research and theory is there on my topic. Number one, you get the awareness. What are various theories? There are various types of theories are there. What are the key sources from where I can gather that information? What are the main theories? Who is who? Who has done the most of the work? Who is the most cited scholar? And you get to know about the persons who have carried out the research. And what is the language of my topic? Every topic has its language, jargons. Engineering will have another, economics will have other, sociology will have other language, and management and all these they have other jargon. Medical will have other. What is the language? Maybe this language may be maybe Latin and Greek to others. Maybe not know. What is the history? How this has developed over a period of time? Evolution of that, we also get to know. And how has the problem been defined? One of the important part in research is problem definition. How we, for example, why the students are absent in the class? This is a problem. Absenteeism of a student in the class. Now you try to find out from the maybe based on some questionnaire, maybe based on some other observation. Are you observe in the class? Maybe observation method may be there. So we start how the problem, what are the different frame of references. You can look a problem from different viewpoints, from economic viewpoint, from sociological, from a multidisciplinary or other viewpoint as well. How is the theory related to practice? There are some things which are abstract. They have no relevance in the practice. It's not applied. Maybe you come out with an idea about something which has no relevance, practical relevance. Key concept variables you get to know, and you also get to know what are the the people the agreement and dissent, where people have agreements as far as the various ideas, various research, and where there is disagreement, whether it is in conformity or it is not, they are at conflict. You also get to know about that, and that leads us to understand justification for your research. This is the gap. This is the gap which I would like to fill by pursuing this research. For example, if you set out to invent wheel, and wheel has already been invented, why literature review? Because you get to know that what research has been done, who are this and that. Then you try to find out this is a void, this is a gap, no work has been done or insubstantial work has been done. You offer a justification. And this further answers what are the shortcomings of various theories, contradictions, whether evidence is lacking or inconclusive, because no conclusive proof may be there. And these provide justification. Whenever you are writing justification for your research, motivation for your research, then you write it. A lot in this area, the evidence is inconclusive. Therefore, another study is needed in this direction. Okay, or if there is the available evidence is very paltry, very low, or you say the limited, is so you justify, and alternative other things are also there. So by looking at, you get a state of knowledge of your discipline, you identify the gaps, you understand about various theories, variables to be used, methodology to be followed, and so on and so forth. So that is why literature review is very important. There is no escape for researcher from the beginning of the research to the end of the research. Again, it is cyclical, you will go on. Now all these things have been summarized here, that you get to know about definition, history, key studies, theories, concepts, themes, key questions, debates, issues, and help identify knowledge gap and theoretical problem. And then it will provide the rationale, justification for your research. We start with the indicative, not complete literature review. Then once you get enrolled, then we carry out the literature review in full-fledged manner. And then your research topic, and then the methodology, how you are going to conduct your research, all these things, what kind of issues are there, what data instrument you will use it, what research design, whether descriptive, exploratory, or what kind of design you will use, causal, what kind of design you will use it, how you will arrive at the validity and reliability. There are various methods available, like some of you may be knowing, like Cron batch alpha, that how consistent you are your answer, that is called reliability. And then once you have collected and analyzed the data, then you analyze it and you write in the finding and you conclude it, and based on maybe recommendation and like that. So this is how the literature review helps you to identify and like that. Now literature review, is as I told you, is the starting point, as well as you will pursue literature review, you will get updated, or you have to update throughout your research. Maybe new paper may come in, during your process, then you will update it. Now, when you have conducted the literature review, which is it is an ongoing process for your research, then like there are various. I think that somebody has taken the search engine part, huh? Okay. So okay. Now you see the literature sources which are available. Like there are some primary sources like report, thesis, email, and like. So these are, and these are some secondary, and these are some tertiary sources, index, abstract, catalog, dictionaries. So these are increasing level of detail, and these are increasing time to publish, like. So one can use literature, some available literature on the basis of this thing. This is how we started. I'm skipping this part, that you start with the read articles and notes and keywords, and make a note of other literature, generate keywords, research questions, and then search or online search you carry out, and title and abstract. We start with the title and abstract, and that gives an idea, and then we thoroughly analyze it, and then whatever is relevant we retrieve it, and finally we check regularly for publication. It is not that you have done it, now you have stopped. How many of you have your uh, you know Google Scholar account? How many of you have? You get the message for some new papers which come in regularly. So I am skipping this part, and I am going to discuss some. I think there is some issue with this. This is got stuck. Okay. No, I'll manage from here. Okay. Okay. Now, in the meantime, if you have any question, I will entertain, because they will change it. There is some problem with this. If any question is there, I will entertain. Yes, yes.
So we always analyze, go for the literature review for primary or secondary data. So on the basis of that, how photographs and archaeological data that have been already been done, how would that be? What kind of data would that be considered to?
I'll answer your question. I'm postponing your question. Okay, because it varies from discipline to discipline, isn't it? Okay. So what I said that is because I do not know the discipline you belong to. That is why I said this thing. Okay. Normally, as I said that we rely on text. Okay. But there are certain areas where the photograph of the person concerned may also be analyzed, isn't it? On the basis of that. Is okay now? अब इसे लगाइए. Even it is not moving actually, otherwise I could have. Not working. There is a problem in slide, even I cannot, it has stuck up here. नहीं मेरा वो निकाल के दे दो। मैंने अपना दिया था, पता नहीं वो भी नहीं काम कर रहा है। ये क्या हुआ क्या? नहीं तो वो तो लगा दिया ना आपने, वो मुझे दे दो, वो मुझे दे दो। ये अच्छा कब हो गया है, क्या मसला क्या है? चेंज ही नहीं हो रहा है।
Hello. I would request the online participants to wait for 5 minutes. We will continue in a short while.
ठीक है, थैंक यू। Sorry for the because you know there is a saying that power corrupts and PowerPoint corrupts absolutely. Okay, so that is why sometimes too much reliance on PowerPoint, you know, creates problem. And so you know that I was discussing about how we search literature. Then there are some ways like how can you picture this. For example, one way when you are carrying out literature, you start with a very wide view. Then you focus here, you zoom in here, you know. We start with a broad, maybe at the time comes like a funnel type. So this is the most important, you know, that we start with our introduction, literature review, and finally, so research becomes very narrow finally. And this is sometime it happen literature review, just people put it one study and abstract, they just read it and just put it like a patchwork, no connection. Okay, just put it together and that's all. And here we try to look at some intersection, you know, also. So various ways, but this is the most important way, you know, a funneling type, you know, the funnel, you understand it. So like we carry out the research. You can picture it, how we look at this. Now one thing I would like, although it is a very simple thing, but it is a very important thing. Important thing is that whenever you are perusing the literature, it is not necessary that you will study every paper. First we scan it, you survey it. We start with maybe title and abstract, okay, find relevant. Then you start reading it, you start question, you start a dialogue with the text, you converse with the text, then you read it again carefully and then take notes, maybe electronic or otherwise, because notes are very important, because it helps us to recall and also help us not to plagiarize. Otherwise in modern day, what is electronic, you just cut paste. So when you are doing this thing, you do not know. Earlier time we used to write it, you know, so we knew it, what is our and what is there, and recall and review. So that is why this SQ3R are very important also. There are books like how to read better and faster, like Norman Lewis type. So not like that you keep your eyes in the middle the line, not like that, but by reading it and other thing you come. All these things are described, but I am leaving it, I am coming to the most important part is that when you are perusing the literature, then the literature, the paper which you are perusing it or studying it, in the beginning of the paper, the purpose of the study is written. The study aims to, the purpose of the study to explore. The study tries to undertake this investigation. It is specified. So one thing is that what is the purpose of this? Then second thing is that how the data has been collected. What was, if primary data is there, what was the sample event? Secondary data is there. For example, in economic finance, we take companies and number of how many participants are there, and gender and like that, another demographic, sociographic profile, and then how this has been carried out, what methods have been used. If a statistical method has been used, what type of method? Whether very basic tools like correlation analysis or some other tests like t-test, z-test has been carried out, or regression, multiple regression, and other kind of regression like logit, probit, multinomial logic, whether and so on, various kind of tools. What kind of method has been used to calculate, and then summarize the key result. So on the basis that when we read it, that this study was carried out to find out this, the sample consisted of this, and it was carried out in this country, and this method regression was used to find out the relationship. For example, these were the key results. You summarize it, and then also point out limitations. What are the shortcomings? Every research paper also writes shortcomings, that these are the shortcomings. Okay, that sample size was limited, or like that, or this method has some limitation. Every method has limitation. No tool is perfect. And then so these three things: purpose, participant, methodology, key result, interpretation, and limitation. Whenever you are carrying out research, literature review, focus should be on these aspects. What is the purpose? Who are the participants? What methodology has been used, and like that. So this is an example, that of abstract, like paper. Whenever paper you are writing paper, so some guideline like Emerald has given this guideline that you write here purpose. What is the research? What methodology has been used? What are the findings? Implications and originality. Originality is one issue. That whether you are going to do one more study, or if your study will push the envelope, or will be some new knowledge will be generated like that. So now, after this purpose, whenever you are perusing the research, a question comes: critical review. What is critical? Critical is not to criticize, isn't it? Critical is, if you look at the dictionary, involving or exercising careful judgment or observation. Exercising or involving careful or judicious evaluation. The word evaluation, judgment evaluation. It involves careful, deliberate, and well-informed judgment. In the context of literature review, we try to find out what are the author's argument and conclusion, how the author has marshaled his argument, how has arrived this, we try to identify. Second thing is, evaluate the strength of the evidence. What are the strengths and weaknesses? when you are critical, then you are looking at these things. Is the evidence sufficient? Whether sample was not large enough to derive any conclusion, whether technique has flaw? Are the authorities cited reliable? Sometimes people quote some studies which itself begs question, like maybe a study conducted in some places like, like a research scholar in our department was conducting a research and he was trying to base his thesis on a study conducted in Punjab. I told him, why you are trying to follow that study? You try to follow these state of art studies which have been conducted in other countries. That study was not up to the mark. The quality, whether the reliable or not, quality of publication. Are the data adequate to support the line of reading? All these questions. Is statistics evidence? Where do they come from? What have been used? How are the relevant? Statistical test appropriate? And sometimes people use now SPSS and others are available. What people do that, you put any data, they will provide the result. Isn't it? Garbage in garbage. Put the data, scale is not clear, nominal scale is there, you put the data and it will come out with some structural equation modeling, for example, in our discipline now has become, everybody is using. What is the use of you have to be, whether the relevant tool has been used or not. So whenever you are trying to look at, you try to look at these things, then you are critical. And being critical means, let me just put it here, the capacity to evaluate what you read and the capacity to relate what you read to other information. The evaluation, whenever you are evaluating something, you are trying to be critical. Naturally, you are looking at whether this this study, the literature review is sufficient or not. One of the major points which are highlighted is the lack of sufficient literature review. People do not cover much. Our tools which have been used are inappropriate. Sample is inappropriate. Interpretation is not appropriate. Whether the findings they are connect or not, or with the objective hypothesis and other thing, there is a connect or not, the conclusion you are drawing. Your conclusion is this much, but you are drawing something else out of that, you are inferring. You are recommending something which you have not studied. All these aspects are, whenever you are looking at, you are trying to find out. So, but I am leaving these things. For example, when you are a disagreement, you start with name calling and you try to attack the person that this researcher is very lousy and this researcher is unethical and like that, So these are some of the points. I am leaving this. I would like to tell you one thing. One person carried out a literature review of a book which was completely biased. You are looking from. A comment was offered by another reviewer. He said, he wrote that a person of this background leaning was not expected to offer a fair review because of but at least a competent review was expected. Even if you are be unfair to somebody, you put out some argument which can support, isn't it? Some like that. So not fair, but competent. That you are unfair to somebody, that you try to, dismiss everything. And if you cannot do that, then start saying that they are this, these belong to this and this, now you start doing that. So disagreement, not a researcher has to. Now there are various ways of organizing research, literature review. One way is you can write literature review in chronological fashion, like year wise, 1960, 19, so on and so forth. So this is called, literature review. The 19, you start with the last, and then the recent study will come in the last, and then you try to organize according the theme or according to methodology. Now, most of the literature try to use the combination of these. Not that only, for example, all these combinations can be used. I think there is some issue with that. I am leaving it, otherwise it will create. So a combination may be used. That you start with this, themes are there, methodology but there are some reviews which just use methodology. And there is a type of review nowadays which is very common, which is called systematic literature review. Have you heard about systematic literature review? Suna hai kabhi? Have you heard? What is this word systematic? What comes to your mind?
Sir, order.
Order. Systematic is according to fixed plan or system or method. What has happened over the years that the volume of research has become so huge in some areas that when researchers are trying to conduct literature, they leave something. Some important thing may be left out, or they may conduct a literature with some bias. Some studies which do not support them, they leave out. Especially this systematic literature review was started being used in medical sciences, because that there is the concept of evidence based. For example, trials are very common in medical. For example, the two group is there. One group is given vaccination, other group is not given. Isn't it? Placebo effect, isn't it? Try to look at. Now, these intervention, there are various studies, for example. So what happened that evidence based, because the policies are based on that, prescriptions are based on that. So that is why it started from there. And that is why systematic literature you are conducting it. You may not specify specifically what kind of studies you have undertaken. Now in systematic you specify what you will include, what you will exclude from the study. For example, one may look at that the studies which have been conducted since this, studies which have a sample size of this, studies which are conducted over this much period, at least 10 years will be taken, studies which have used this technique, you specify it. And then on the basis of the you sort, you carry out, you include that, exclude those which do not fall. Now it provides a reliable check that you spell out this criteria, that you will study you will conduct literature studies conducted in India at least this much, and this technique was used, at least some criteria may be there which are used for that. And because that, and on that basis finally you try to evaluate critical naturally, and then you arrive at a synthesis of that, that on the basis of that, for example, individual study, what you do, you try to unpack individual studies. Unpacking is you analyze it, individual parts, you break the parts, individual studies. What was the sample, what was the purpose, method, and so on and so forth. You are unpacking. Okay. And when you have used this, then you try to pack again. Not that you are reassembling the thing, but not that the order may change. That is why synthesis is not summarizing. Synthesis is that you try to write a cohesive connection between among the papers that you have perused. You And you know that some synthesis is the highest level of, you start with the cognitive level, understanding, define, explain, and then the highest level is synthesis. You know, that you try to, from the various discipline, various papers, and then you try to make a connection like that. The systematic literature review actually is a, you start with a protocol, you define that what you will do it, then you search some criteria, inclusion, exclusion criteria, and then you search, then you appraise and synthesize finally. And you know that there are some other techniques are available. For example, some like a narrative synthesis may be there. Okay, narrative means you write in pro, and other quantitative synthesis is also available now, which is called meta-analysis. Is the evaluation of evaluation. I will not go in that detail. I will just, one of the method to overcome biases, prejudice in research is to conduct systematically, which sets out a predefined criteria for inclusion or exclusion of certain papers from that, because that offers a reliable method, accountability, and like that. Just keep in mind this thing. Otherwise, how you critically analyze, other thing remains same, isn't it? And finally, in any, for example, when you are putting together all the thing, you not only rearrange, but out of that you create something new out of that. All these are given, but I am leaving. Okay. Because time is also not, you know, very detailed discussion. You need, many lectures can be conducted on systematic literature. Now, one important thing about is that when you have conducted literature review, then one of the major problem is writing. You heard about plagiarism? What is plagiarism? Ideas are, you know, verbatim, you just lift somebody's, you know, material without change, no change. There are various type of, actually, I could have shown you, but you know, I deleted while coming here, you know, some of the answers. So one way to avoid plagiarism, now UGC also prescribed that it should be less than 10%, is to paraphrase, paraphrasing. You write in your notebook, okay, isn't it? So one way to avoid is to paraphrase. When you are paraphrasing, the first thing is that you understand, you should understand the text, number one. Then, and mark them in, whenever you are even in electronic, you can mark them. These are the important words. Shukriya. Thank you. You can find out synonyms or alternative phrases. Please remember one thing. You cannot replace jargon, because every discipline has a, for example, statistical significance. You cannot find a different word for that. You will, even UGC says that you should remove all the jargons and other things, which are part in sciences. Maybe some jargons are there, so you have to change the structure of the text. Maybe adjective to adverb, noun to verb, long sentence to, like this requires that you write it, isn't it? And ideas. In writing, you do not end up changing the meaning unless you start with understanding and then you. Now, how we carry out this thing? For example, somebody's work. Although it's not my, I think my friend Professor Asim Siddiqui will take up report writing, so he will be taking up some of these parts. But for example, when we are reporting, the word of indicates, the reveals, shows, all the in an article by this, in this paper by this, X has expressed, reports, notes, concludes, argues, discovered. Like these words, when you are reporting it, I ask my student to write down these things. You know, when you are reading a paper, you write down those things on the margin and use it whenever you, where you look. So, you know, you are reporting something, then, and when you are, for example, you are writing something, similar opinion, for example, Mr. X and has similarly, these are called signaling words. Similarly, equally, likewise, Mr. X has also argued, has presented this evidence. For example, you want to strengthen something, these words can be used in addition, moreover, furthermore, and like that. The others argue, like alternative word that goes alternatively, it could be argued. All these words can be used. Rebuttal, you try to refute some argument, these words can be used. On the one hand, contrast. On the contrary, like this, Mr. X has, so these things. Consequence as a result, like this. Therefore, in conclusion, in summary, we can conclude. All these words are there. So that one should use profusely when you are writing a literature review, isn't it? When you are reporting it, paraphrasing. And something more about formal vocabulary, features of vocabulary, academic writing. You know that whenever you are writing paraphrasing is to avoid plagiarism. And the word, please remember that the word has been derived from the word plagiarist. It means kidnapper. Okay. And the first reported kidnapping, rather, plagiarism was when a book was written by Khatib al-Baghdadi, I think, if I remember correctly, Kitabul Haywan. Okay. Kitabul Haywan was written, and then it was said that he has lifted from some Greek scholars from that, like that. So, like you take up, it reminds me of incident. You may be knowing about Fareed Zakaria. Fareed Zakaria, who is Fareed Zakaria? Is a very famous journalist who also writes for New York Times. What happened that he wrote an article in New York Times. And New York Times, one thing is that you should not write in your word. Ideas should also be yours. And if your ideas are not, you should attribute acknowledgement or reference. What happened that one line or two line where Fareed Zakaria's article, attribution was missing. He was not allowed to write for a month or so, Fareed Zakaria. And what has happened over there in the age of internet, you know, plagiarism has played a havoc. Whether plagiarism is a learned sin or you are born with, with the plagiarism. No, it's a learned sin. You learn this sin, you copy paste, isn't it? And in an age of internet, it has become very easy that you cut paste and like. Why? Sometimes what happened that when students are paraphrasing, they try to look at Tazara without understanding. That completely changes the meaning. Completely changes the meaning. So one thing is that you should use formal vocabulary. Not that Mr. A says, Mr. A argues, Mr. A claims, Mr. A points out, expresses, all these words, not that says. Do not write says in academic writing. And normally it is preferred that you should use passive voice. But active voice is also being used. I collect the data. Even in renowned journals like Journal of Finance, which is my field, the data was collected, the data was analyzed. the sample consisted of. I mean, you write in passive voice. This is it may vary from, and you use cautious language. Not that when you are writing something, you are making sweeping generalization. You write the word. What is, you heard about hedging? Hedging is a linguistic device which, accentuates, intensity of some argument. Tone down. You write, it seems that the results are driven, not that the results are driven by this. It indicates, probably it is driven by this. Now you are hedging it. You are not making you are trying to dilute this thing, because your research is not 100% sure. Maybe the first thing, sample was incorrect. Something, this is called cautious language, because in researches always a cautious language. And objective language is very important, because humative language you should not use, like the subjective language. Luckily, unfortunately, I did not receive the questionnaire, or luckily the COVID, like is emotive language you should not use. Fortunately, the result, the findings are this. No, surprisingly, these words should be avoided. It is, for example, we write it. It is worthwhile to know, like these words, objective language. You are not saying that, putting that. You are trying to report something, but in an objective way, isn't it? And questions should not be used. The attendance has declined in the classroom. What are the reasons for this? You will not write like this. Maybe in research question you can write it before that. Contracted form, don't, can't, they are not suggestive. Okay. And in any formal writing, it should not be without references. It should contain references. And whenever you are researching, please recall the first thing which I said, in research, work of others. Research is not that you are the only one, the pioneer, nobody has done it. Okay. So that is why acknowledgement, referencing is very important. I do not know what kind of referencing is followed by discipline wise, but you have to acknowledge. There is a difference between reference and bibliography. References are only which you have referred in the text, whereas bibliography is that which whatever material you have consulted during the research, you write it. It varies from the institution to institution what they insist on. So like that. And moreover, one should not rely too much on secondary sources. Chinese whisper suna hai aapne? Have you heard about Chinese whisper? If I say something to him and he whispers in her ear, and then finally the message gets distorted finally. This is called Chinese whisper. Aapne secondary sources, somebody may have referred to it. Maybe he has not quoted properly. So secondary sources should be avoided to that. Maybe the material is not available. And there are various ways to reference, like APA system is there, like here comma is there, Harvard style is there. So all these are there. You can go on the net, you will find out these things. And if you have Google Scholar, there is also provision of citation. देखा है आपने? Have you seen? Google Scholar में देखा है? You can we open internet here? Just after the class is open. These are some of the things. Now lastly, then I will take up your questions. Any researcher has to face intellectual challenge, isn't it? Intellectual challenge may be that you are struggling. कितने लोगों ने फिशिंग का शौक है? हाउ मेनी? जाते हैं, हंटिंग के लिए जाते हैं? कभी you come disappointed? Sometimes there is a good catch. Sometimes research is also like that. But a sustained effort should be there, isn't it? What happened? Then emotional challenge, motivation is also there. And organizational challenges, maybe this database is not, this journal is not available, this is not available, the hostel, if you are living in hostel, food is not good. Food for thought, that is why it's hard to come, because food is not good. So, but I advise you one thing, that there is an economist, Nobel Prize winner, her name is Dept, who received Nobel Prize with Abhijit Banerjee. It's the Dept. Have you heard about? She has written that when she came to MIT for PhD, then her brother advised that normally her brother is a professor of philosophy in France. He said that at least write one page. Normal thesis is not more than 150 or 200 pages, isn't it? If you write one page every day, then thesis will be completed. And famous economist John Maynard Keynes once said that I write one page at least a day to remove mental constipation. There is a mental constipation. You write it, rewrite it, and then, okay. And lastly, you see this, some, and then also critical thinking. Academics do not go for vacation, okay. And I am leaving this wisdom. With knowledge comes wisdom. Knowledge is not synonymous with wisdom. You have to not that filled of mind. For example, I have taken a literature review. You are filled up with information. There is a difference between filled of mind and informed mind. Okay? Make mistake, learn again. Every day I also learn something new. If you do not learn anything, at least look in the dictionary, learn some new words before you go to bed. And please remember that research is science, art and craft. What is science? You may get to know about how to conduct literature review, what are the statistical tools available, how to use SPSS, these are the specific, you do it. If you do, then art is, you get to know when to use it. And craft is, the more you, like craftsman, the more you will become perfect, the more you do it. So it is science, art and craft. It's not that the, an activity that you can acquire overnight. It's not a T20 game, okay? It's a 5-day test. So with this, I have discussed, I have left many a thing, but you can ask questions if you have.
We will have the question and answer session now. Participants who have any queries may ask now.
Hello.
Yes.
Yeah. Sir, I have a question to ask.
Hello.
Please introduce yourself.
We'll start with the offline participants first. I'd like the online participants to wait, please.
Sir, I have a question to ask.
Yes.
So you discussed about the literature review. So after the process of literature review, is there a tendency for the researcher to generate a certain bias or replicate certain methods which he has actually gone through in the literature review? So what are the steps or checks that one researcher can practice to eliminate that bias?
You know that researcher is also like human being, isn't it? So that is why systematic literature review, which has been proposed, is one way to avoid that. You specify the criteria, that this is the criteria of inclusion or exclusion something, and then you arrive at that. So one way, but you know that you cannot altogether eliminate that. You know, sometime deliberately, sometime unintentionally, you try to avoid. But my suggestion will be that whenever you are perusing a research, always try to like state of art. You know, the top journals. For example, sometime quality appraisal of the published paper. What type of paper you are using it. Sometimes people skip something which they think that it's not. They cannot do it. Sometimes they only refer the literature those studies which can support their findings later on. So these things, but to be, one cannot be 100% objective, but systematic literature review is one way to avoid that. When you have you can be held account if you left out something. So this can help to some extent, but as I said that after all, researcher is also human being. What kind of lens he is, using, what is his frame of reference, like that, what is the availability. Sometimes some material may not be available, so he may not be aware of. Various researches have been done. People did not know it. That is why literature review tells us that what has been done, what has not been done. So this may be one way, systematic literature review, and that is why it is gathering acceptance and popularity also. You specify that. For example, emerging market or India or developed market or this, you specify that. Or certain, you take up only those studies, then you try to, it may be one way. Yes.
The online participants can also ask now.
Hello, sir. Very good evening. Hello, I'm able to hear. Hello. My voice is coming. Hello. Hello. Okay. So I have two and three questions, like sir, which you in which you have showed the patchwork thing for writing a literature review. So is this really
Ms.
works
Shelja,
for?
actually your voice is not audible here. Can you please type in your question in the chat box?
You can take up the next one. In the meantime, she can type the question and I'll answer.
Okay, I'll type it.
Sir, the question is, can references be in part of bibliography in report writing?
I just told that, bibliography will contain all the material that you have used, isn't it? And references are only which you have referred your text, isn't it? So it may vary from the institutional requirement. Some require bibliography. For example, I may have consulted a book of some material which I have not referred in the text, but that too. This is a major difference between them. and it may institutional requirement but has to see that, and also publication. For example, referencing requirement. For example, I have taken up APA and other, but some journals, for example, they give that you have to use this referencing, so you have to use that if they are asking for bibliography or something like that.
Sir, there's another question. Does patchwork really work for writing literature review?
Patchwork is a patchwork. Is more evident, that you just put together. For example, nowadays what happens that people, students do not read the entire paper. They just look at the abstract and just write down. So that is why one thing is that we start with the abstract, then we read the paper completely. Patchwork means that, so you can understand even somebody is, it will not be a cohesive one, You have to make connect. You have to unpack individually, then pack. Not the same way you pack it, you rearrange it.
So she is adding, please discuss language type with example.
Language type?
Yes, sir.
What is language type?
Can you please elaborate?
Yeah, initially you discussed about the language type while writing literature review. So what kind of language type you were discussing? I just want to know that with example.
Language type, I suppose a formal language should be used. I told several aspects of it. Like you use formal language. Formal means that you should not say says or.
No, sir. Sorry, sir. Not this type of language type. In the section you were discussing about the what is literature review. So you were discussing there should be a language type of thing. I think that was mentioned in your slide number 2 or 3. I think so.
I got the point. What you are saying is language of the topic. Language of the topic I'm talking about. That is
Okay.
Language. Every language has its own jargons, vocabulary, isn't it? So
Yes.
That is the.
Okay. So if I'm getting the correct way of language type, in your sense, like what you are discussing, like if suppose my topic is discussing in a certain direction, so
What is your topic, by the way?
my topic is rejuvenation of urban water bodies.
Okay, there are some. Okay.
Yeah.
The word reservation is a language, is a part of that, isn't it?
So okay, so like rejuvenation or certain kind or other kind of elements, if I'll adding into that topic, so it will add in the language type of thing, right?
Naturally, every topic has its own language. For example, a person who is doing research in sociology will not use reservation. Reservation he can use in different contexts. But water bodies and like that. So this is the meaning why every topic has its own language. For example, scientific terminologies are different from the terminologies which are used in architecture or finance or like that. P value, for example, is a statistical or significance. It is every. This is by language.
Okay. So that kind of language type. Okay, I'm getting. Thank you, sir. These are all my questions. Thanks a lot.
Any other question?
Sir, I have one question.
Yes.
So like I have a topic, for example, I have a topic and I found 2 research papers on the same.
What is the topic?
So like for example, I have a topic like we did a dissertation last semester. So my topic was 3D printing. So like I found 2 research papers on the same, but they both were in conflict with each other. So how do we go about this?
One of the things is that may be a justification for research. That the conclusion of the paper are different, they are contradictory. So therefore another study is needed to further explore. That is why I said in the inconclusive or contradictory like that may be justification.
Do we have any further questions? No? Okay. Thank you so much, sir, for enlightening us with your knowledge and kind words. It was truly enriching and informative. Thank you so much.